Have you ever listened to a friend or critic gush about a game, speak about the intricacies of the core mechanics, talk about the depth of emotion in the story, fawn over the complexities of the level design, and just think, I don't get it. Why do some people connect to game experiences whilst other people simply don't understand the hype and love for the same games? This isn't to say people are having fun wrong, or liking things they shouldn't, but perhaps the reasons why feelings vary to such a huge degree, and why people struggle to have an unbiased opinion when assessing art. This is mainly going to be from personal experience with games more than any video I've done before, so I hope you can indulge me as I speak about my childhood time spent in the glow of my CRT while the SNES whirs away. The easiest headspace to speak about from my personal experience that people immediately understand is nostalgia. Or better put, having an emotional attachment or detachment from a game. I'm sure everybody has fond memories of playing certain games from their childhood that they love. Perhaps weren't even all that good, but you have great memories attached to them. Personally, it's an interesting case for me, as my favourite game of all time is The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I vividly remember playing this game over and over and over again when I was 5 to 6. My reception teacher, her and her boyfriend were playing the game at the same time and would often speak to me about it and ask me how I've done in a certain temple, and I would, like a child, giddily explain what I did in this and this and that, and they'd say they found this, and I'd go home and, I gotta try it, gotta play the game and try it again. It was really fun. Some of my fondest memories come from when my mum used to play The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past with me on the SNES when I was about 4 years old. My mum would play most of the game as it was too difficult for me, but Ocarina of Time was the first Zelda game we played together, where I was mainly in control, and it was some of the most enjoyable memories that I have. My mum would take control again when it came against the Redeads or the bottom of the well, and we worked together to solve the puzzles. I loved this game now, I've played it multiple times since, and I do believe it's a genuine mastercraft. Even if certain gameplay elements or level design or graphical quality aren't quite as amazing as I remember having played hundreds of other games since, it still holds a special place in my heart forever, and I will always associate it with good times. Curiously, conversely, you would think Majora's Mask would fill a similar place in my life, but it's quite the opposite. I played it when it came out at the age of 7 with my mum. She printed out a big, thick old GameFAQ guide, which was like 300 pages of laminated paper to find every secret as we played through the game together. I do remember enjoying it a lot, but this was at the same time that my mum had gotten an office job after my little sister was old enough to not need looking after anymore. And so she would only play with me a few days a week or after work. But right as I got towards the end of the Stone Tower Temple, she told me that she was going to be working full-time at her new job and wouldn't have as much time to play with me anymore. I had to become a big boy and finish it on my own and tell her how it ends. I never did finish the game. I just felt sad that we wouldn't be able to do it together, and I didn't want to have her miss out. I got all of the masks, all of the upgrades, all of the power-ups, I got everything, but I specifically didn't challenge Skull Kid at the end because of it. This led to resentment of the game, and I became overly critical of the game's design and systems as the years went on. Even though it is another excellent game, I have negative feelings associated with it. I have since completed the game on Virtual Console and the 3DS remake, but even if I still believe the dungeon design isn't fantastic, I have to admit how wonderful the game's setting, themes and ideas are. This just shows that two excellent games from my childhood can be remembered so differently, purely due to personal memories I have associated with them. Switching gears a bit, I'm going to speak about another great aspect of a game. It's immersion, where you completely lose yourself in a world. You get drawn in by a character, you get drawn in by the setting, the design, the entire story. When I first played Dark Souls, I had already played quite a few classic NES platformers. I was used to playing quote-unquote hard games, so the prospect of playing Dark Souls didn't intimidate me. However, as much as he will deny it, after Otis introduced me to it, he told me to level resistance and focus on dexterity weapons in my first playthrough. Admittedly, he did give me hints like using the Define effect on my weapon to permanently kill skeletons, etc. but this made my first run through of Dark Souls so much harder. Most of the segments leading up to the bosses weren't too tough after getting used to how they played, but the bosses themselves became absolute nightmares, where my attacks barely chipped away at anything from their gargantuan health pools. This culminated in me taking 2 weeks to defeat Ornstein and Smo. For the first half of the game, it was mainly filled with bitterness and annoyance at the obtuse game. I mainly continued through spite and stubbornness, but upon finally defeating Fatty, I achieved heaven. Otis informed me of the trolling and told me I had now become quote-unquote one of us. It was the purest distillation of what Dark Souls is about, the elation from surmounting the odds with your own skill. I learned backstabs, parrying, the intricacies of the game design, and I fell in love with it. I played it over and over and over again, trying different combinations, understanding how it works. I can absolutely see how people would give up on Dark Souls from frustration, or people who aren't patient won't appreciate the core appeal of the gameplay. Similarly, I can see how people who look up guides to walk them through the entire game without experiencing the fear of the unknown, or the joy of discovering the mechanics, wouldn't feel the same high points as doing something through your own self-improvement. The next mindset I'm going to talk about is Burnout. The game I associate most with Burnout is Hollow Knight. This was a strange case, as it was recommended to me by Otis around the same time that I played a lot of Metroidvanias and had just beaten Bloodborne, so a Dark Soulsian Metroidvania would seem a good fit for me, especially seeing as it was praised so much. But when I started playing it, I just couldn't get into it at all. A couple of hours in, I gave up, assuming I just didn't like it. I then picked up Persona 5 and fell in love with that game. I adored it. I poured hundreds of hours into playing that game to completion. What was strange was that a few years later, when I had to travel to work on a train every day, I picked up Hollow Knight again on the Switch, as I had convinced myself to just give it another try. But this time, I liked it. I got swept up in the art style, the exploration, the combat. I beat it, I loved the game and wondered why I had such a different experience the second time playing. The obvious theory is Burnout with a genre. I had recently played Guacamelee, Axiom Verge and Bloodborne at roughly the same time, and I must have just become tired of 2D Metroidvania games and punishing Souls-like combat difficulty. I gravitated to a swap of genre to JRPG with Persona 5 as I hadn't played one in a while, so it must have been a desire to play something different. Coming back with fresh eyes and a clearer headspace let me appreciate that game so much more. Now this next mindset is very personal to speak about, and it's emotional resonance, as it certainly only connects to one person and their experiences. So I spent a lot of childhood with my nan, who was the best person in my life. I have as much love for her as I do my parents, and she shaped me to be the person I am today, with the values I hold. When I was 18, she passed away unexpectedly one day, and this left me with extreme amounts of grief. All within 1 year. I had my university exams and moved into dorms, but still held on to unhealthy amounts of negative emotions due to this huge upheaval in my life. Without going into the details of that day, it certainly is the most pivotal day in my entire life thus far, and it was a very tough time. I'd really not been playing many games because of this, and I was just not in any mood to enjoy any of them. About 6 or so months after my nan had left my life, I played Fire Emblem Awakening. I was liking it somewhat, but I still hadn't connected with it. Then, about halfway through the game, there is a specific moment in which a major character who is related to the hero of the story dies, and it leaves a massive hole in their lives. The next level has somber, beautiful music and rain, and it's about tough decisions, about people who don't want to fight, and yet they still must for honour, even when their head's not in it. And I wept and cried at this specific moment. I felt the pain of the main characters, and I understood it, and it really connected with me because of that. I felt connected to Crom in that I felt he was going through something similar to what I was going through. As ludicrous as that sounds, I made that connection, and I was invested in seeing their quest through to the end. And Fire Emblem Awakening helped me through a very dark period in my life, and I am forever thankful for it. And this mindset can apply to many people in many times of their life, with many games or many movies, books, pieces of art, how it helps them get through tough times, or it's one of the greatest strengths that art has on the human soul. Moving on to something slightly less deep, we would have trusted opinions. I will speak about 2 Zelda games from this, Breath of the Wild and Skyward Sword. I must admit, I do have a problem in that I like to read the reviews and the discourse about a game before it comes out, and this certainly does shape my opinions. And there were a few reviews for The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild that didn't review it as an unbridled masterpiece, citing annoyances with certain mechanics, such as the weapon durability and the lack of climbing due to rain, janky combat, and unsubstantial linear dungeons. Most of the critic and public reviews gave it a 10 out of 10, calling it a masterpiece. Some people's experience with those mechanics clearly affected their enjoyment of the game, whereas some people like myself got swept up in the majesty of it. Now, this isn't to say that those critiques aren't valid. I completely think they are. I do agree that they are valid issues that can be improved upon, and don't begrudge people for not being able to overlook these problems. I wonder if it relates to growing up having such an attachment to the franchise that I have a more forgiving mindset for the game's faults. And this isn't me having a go at people not calling it a 10 out of 10. Hey, it's a 7 out of 10 if you want. It's how you interpret art and how it connects to you that really matters. On a different end of the spectrum, Skyward Sword, I certainly was guilty of being sucked into the hype for Skyward Sword. I was 17 at the time the reviews ranked it so highly, and I was so ready to enjoy it. I remember playing through it and thinking, this is the best Zelda I have ever played. But slowly over time it didn't stick with me nearly as much as previous games. The backtracking, the empty sky, the shallow boss fights and the weird stealth segments had tarnished my view of the game. And giving it some space from the hype and the critical praise at the time, it made me realise that it's actually one of my least favourite Zelda games. Whereas at the time I would have defended it so fiercely and fanatically, which makes me understand how people can be so protective of things they love, so willing to defend any criticism of something that they love, some franchise or game or anything that they hold personally dear, taking it as some sort of slight against their character. It had great moments of course, but upon replaying it I couldn't get past the points that I excused earlier. My mindset was far more open and critical, due to not relying on these trusted opinions anymore. Another mindset I thought about whilst writing the script which surprised me is actually the experience a person has in a medium. I believe some games genuinely do require prior game experience to truly get the most out of a game. Not to say a complete novice cannot enjoy a game, but knowledge of prior established cliches lets you know when they are being innovated on or turned on their head. Undertale is a wonderful game that emotionally resonated with a lot of people. Rightfully so, but there's its use of established RPG mechanics that lead to the most memorable moments in the game. The typical mechanic in RPG being turn-based combat for experience and loot are being played upon, as any relatively experienced player will lead towards this. When the reveal towards the end that violence on cute creatures affected your playthrough, your saving and reloading, even down to watching a let's play of the genocide route, are cleverly used in the game's narrative to confront the player's actions. Even using familiar concepts for jokes and puzzles may go over some novice players' heads who wouldn't understand the clever twisting of tropes clearly played a part into the discourse surrounding the game. A very vocal fandom emerged, completely taken by Undertale, and the feelings it gave them, and a very vocal anti-fandom emerged, not understanding why it was so popular, and it didn't connect with them. There are other mindsets at play here. I mean, if you don't emotionally connect with the characters being written about, you can just see it as a strange, cheap game maker game, and not something that truly grabbed the hearts of so many people in 2015. If you've seen any of my older videos, you probably know that I like Super Smash Bros. I have played all the games growing up, and it was my gateway into games like Earthbound, Fire Emblem, WarioWare, Metroid, all sorts. I must have played Super Smash Bros. Brawl for over 500 hours, and Smash Wii U for about the same. I even went to some tournaments as I was decent enough to win some matches in my uni against most people I've played. I wasn't good enough to win any major matches at tournaments, and I wasn't able to connect with a lot of the people there. And that's when I realised that I enjoyed the game and the love letter to Nintendo more than the competitive aspect. I didn't find research into frame data, labbing, combos, and the competition aspect enjoyable compared to actually playing through the story. I realised this with most sports that I play. I enjoy bettering myself and the experience of the game rather than actually pushing myself to win. I know it sounds like a weird problem, but I just can't play mates at Smash Brothers anymore who have no experience in the game, as I just roll them, and it's not really fun to pull punches or destroy my opponent. And I'm not good enough to play against people who practice and lab,
except for Otis,
as I will never have the drive or desire to improve my skills to the point that I can beat them, as I would just much rather play different games and experience new things. So I won't be able to enjoy the nail-biting close matches of the fun casual party atmosphere with friends, and it really has killed my enthusiasm for the genre. I was barely interested in playing any of the DLC, I just find the reveals and the respect to the series far more interesting than actually picking up and playing them. That's not to say I don't respect the fighting game community. Looking at the top level play, it's so awesome to watch, and so exciting. I'm jealous of the people who immensely love fighting games. I really am. I look at Otis playing Guilty Gear Strive and I think I would love to be interested enough to play him, but I just really don't have that in me. I do hope if another Smash game comes out, it gives me the same enjoyment as playing Subspace Emissary for the first time, and it's because I'm a shameless fanboy. The final mindset I want to speak about is association. I love Paper Mario. The first three are magic, especially Thousand Year Door. When Paper Mario Sticker Style came out, I was very excited to play it, but unfortunately, it was pretty awful. A lack of creativity combined with worthless RPG mechanics really spoiled my enjoyment for the series. Now, part of this is definitely harsher criticism because the series has such high standards that come before it. When Paper Mario Color Splash came out, I was hoping that they would learn from their mistakes, but it was apparent that these mistakes were here to stay. No longer does the Paper Mario series exist in my eyes. Another thing has taken its place, showing arrogance and obstinance in its shoddy design. The thing that hurts the most is that even with the awful reception to Sticker Star, they just doubled down on what made people dislike it, with this attitude of, this is how this game will be, you will love it. And that soured my mood most of all. I never bought Origami King as I'm certain it would just annoy me and I wouldn't like it. People have been reviewing Color Splash and Origami King well, but it will be forever associated with the old series, and I cannot separate this and look upon it as its own entity whilst its mechanics still mimic those of the old series. Were they to rename the latest three games as their own IP away from Paper Mario, would I like it more? Probably not, as a bad game is always going to be bad, but I wouldn't hate it nearly as much as I do. It would just be another lackluster game to be forgotten, and this is where Bug Fables comes in. It won my heart and made me realise quite how soulless the new three games were. My nostalgic connection to the first three games hampers anything that I view as spitting on their legacy, and only makes me love things filling the void much more. I don't know if Bug Fables would have hit so hard for me if Intelligent System hadn't shit the bed so hard and left me feeling bitter. Playing Bug Fables and getting the same feelings I had when I grew up playing Paper Mario, that definitely benefited the game in my eyes and made me enjoy it far more than perhaps I would have if Paper Mario hadn't gone away. In conclusion, I hope these personal experiences I've shared regarding games inspires you to think more critically about what you enjoy and why you enjoy it. Everyone is unique and has their own tastes, so knowing why factors can affect those tastes may encourage you to try something new or pick up something you didn't give much of a chance. Who knows? You may find yourself having a better time than you thought.
A place, a world unseen. okay.